This is day one of notes on chapter 1 section 7. We will see more of this next week, but I just want to kind of introduce you to the distributive property to make sure you understand it before we do some review and catch up work tomorrow. Number 19 on this question gives us 1/4 times 4f minus 8. Of course, you know I love giving you fractions because I need to make sure you kind of fix your fear of those. You just watched a video discussing the distributive property and how this number meets both of them. There's even an example in the book where it gives you this and talks about what's the simplified form. Notice that the 3 on the outside, kind of like the lady showed you, distributes to both of these. 3 meets x, and I always use a plus. 3 meets 8. 3 times x is 3x. 3 times 8 is 24. That's your answer there. She also discussed how this goes backwards as well. So 5b meets negative 7. They don't do it the way I do, but they do have the negative 4 at least meeting negative 7, where this makes negative 35b, and 2 negatives when you multiply, remember, makes a positive. So looking at these questions that I'm going to show you real quickly, 1/4 is going to meet up with 4f, and again I always use a plus. 1/4 is going to meet up with negative 8. Now what I'm trying to get you used to, which is why I always give you fractions, is that the whole number will always multiply up. So 4f is going to multiply by 1, giving me 4f over 4. Looking at this, 1/4 times negative 8 is going to be a negative. Again, this is going to go up to become 8 over 4. These two 4s, 4 divided by 4 cancels out, of course, because it's 1, which gives us f, and we never put two signs right next to each other. Plus a negative would be the same as minus, and 8 divided by 4 is 2. So when you do these today, just make sure you take your time, especially showing that step will help you out, and on the quiz it'll give you the points you need instead of going straight to the answer. So just make sure you take your time, and again, don't rush through this, because the distributive property has caused people a lot of stress simply because of silly things like a negative or not multiplying right or not simplifying all the way. 21 gives us negative 8z minus 10, in parentheses negative 1.5. Notice that I put a line through my z. In algebra with all these variables and letters, you might want to do things like that so you don't confuse your z for a 2, because that can cause you a lot of issues. Either way, the other thing is that this line or this piece on the outside can also be in the back, and you simply multiply it up. So in this case, negative 8z is going to meet negative 1.5. Again, I like to use a plus to connect it. Even though the book doesn't, it just keeps me safe. You have to respect the fact that this is a negative 10 meeting a negative 1.5 here. Now you work them out. 8z times negative 1.5. Well, I don't know what 8 times 1.5 is. It shows me that the answer is 12, so this will be a positive because it's 2 negatives, so positive 12, and don't forget your z. Here, these two numbers are both negative, so you know it's going to be positive. 10 times 1.5 should be 15, which it is, and that represents the first part of what you're going to be asked to do in terms of this new information today. So again, just take your time, make sure you show those pieces. I would recommend always using a plus to connect them. That way you don't get confused on your signs. You also have the second part of this, which is dealing with a fraction here, but it's not really going to be a major part to deal with. Just make sure you follow along carefully and pay attention to what's going on. If you are okay with distributive property, here is a question problem number 2. It looks similar to what we have. And what they do here is they take the 7x plus 2 over 5. And from what I see, the 7x plus 2 is still there, but they turn the 5 on the bottom into 1/5, which means that we're just working with fractions again. Of course, it's my favorite thing. And so you do the distributive property the way you've been taught, and you finish it up. So looking at 27, there is a 3 on the bottom, which means we will turn into 1/3. And then we will simply take what's up top and put it into parentheses. And again, this is just a basic distributive property. Now taking 1/3 meeting 8, and which means plus 1/3 meeting, and again remember this is a negative 9x. The whole number I'm trying to teach you goes to the top, giving us 8 over 3, plus this is a positive times a negative, which is a negative 9x over 3, because that's what 9x times 1 is, Keep in mind again, we never write a plus and negative, so the 8 over 3 cannot be reduced. This turns into a minus, but 9 divided by 3 is actually 3, I believe, so it'll be 8 over 3 minus 3x. Keep in mind you must reduce any fractions that can be reduced, and do not turn that into a fraction. You're only going to do not turn that into a decimal. The only time you're going to use decimals is if there's a decimal in the question. Number 30 gives me 18x plus 51 over 17. Again, first thing I want to do is turn 17 into 1 over 17 and take what's in parentheses, or on the top, and put it in parentheses. This is again the distributive property. 1/17 meets 18x, and which means plus 1/17 meets 51. The whole number always goes to the top when you multiply fractions, so 18x over 17 plus, this is already positive, which becomes 51 over 17. I am pretty sure that 18 over 17 cannot be simplified, but what I can do to verify that I don't get this wrong is test to see what 51 divided by 17 is. We see that it's 3, which means that we actually end up with 18x over 17 plus 3. Don't ever be afraid to just type something in just to check, because if you stop here on the quiz, it is going to cost you a couple points, and that's not a good situation, especially when you've done so well to get so close to that answer. 4 real quick questions dealing with mental math. I just want to show you how you can use mental math to kind of do numbers like this, 5.1 times 8, and make it easier. What the book does is it uses the distributive property. We are multiplying by 8 and we're taking it times 5.1. Those are two numbers, and it's kind of hard to do in your head, but what you can do is you can recognize that 5.1 is pretty close to 5 plus, or is actually the value of 5 plus 0.1. 5 plus 0.1 is 5.1, and then we can multiply it by 8. Now watch how much easier this is. When I take 8 times 5, I get 40. When I take 8 times 0.1, I get 0.8. That gives me 40.8, which is much easier to do than the long multiplication that you think you might have to. And the more you practice, the more you can actually do that in your head. But this is something that's going to be shown on your work today, and I just want to make sure you kind of think about how you can use the distributive property to make some of these multiplications easier. For example, 299 times 3, I couldn't do it in my head. I guarantee you I couldn't do that in my head. But if I think about the fact that 299 is pretty close to 300, and that it's simply 300 minus 1, I like numbers with a bunch of zeros, so 300 minus 1 is 299 times 3. I know that 300 times 3 is 900, minus, I know that 300 times 1 is 3. 900 minus 1, or minus 3, is 897. So that is what they mean when they say use mental math. Yes, a lot of us will be able to use a calculator, but it's just good sometimes to be able to see these things and how the numbers can be worked to your advantage. 4 times 197, the 4 is going to stay, but 197 is pretty close to a number with a bunch of zeros, which would be 200, and it would be 200 minus 3. 4 times 200 is 800. 4 times 3 is 12. If you take 12 away from 800, I think you get 788, or somewhere around there. I'm pretty sure it's 788, and that would be your answer. So very simple to do. You just have to make sure you understand how you're using distributive property to break down a number that's more complex. 6 again is very simple. 9.1, if you think about it, is the same as the whole number 9 plus 0.1. 6 times 9 is 54, plus 6 times 0.1 is 0.6. Putting those together, we get 54.6. So get some practice on this work. See what you can do to knock it out, and again, be careful and be sure to use the assistance on the questions, because from what I've found out when I'm working with them, the one that walks you through the question is very helpful, because it actually takes you step by step. Other than that, feel free to ask questions to me whenever you're working through them.